My name is Chris, and I was addicted to methamphetamine. I guess what got me involved in drugs in the first place was I was in an environment where there were a lot of drugs around. Growing up, I would always see people, having fun, doing partying, having drinks, and I just thought that looked like a good time. I don't really remember like any kind of euphoric effect. It wasn't really the effect that did it for me, it was the reaction that I got from everyone else. Here I was, this little kid, and hitting a joint, and everyone was laughing and thought it was hilarious, and that is really what did it for me. Being the center of that attention, getting the reaction from everyone else. It wasn't really and honestly, I don't even know if I actually inhaled because I didn't have that effect. Everyone just sitting around partying, and it was all these adults, and here I am, the center of the attention, and I loved it. As I'm getting into middle school, and this is the time when the don't do drugs things was very popular, so I lived with a lot of secrets. It was very apparent that those were not the things to do, because we would have these police officers, people coming into school, basically saying, if you ever see any of these things, you need to tell us, and we'll take care of it. So I knew that if I said anything to anyone, that my parents would be in trouble. My dad went to prison for drug sales. So I grew up in that environment, and I grew up with this problem with authority. One of my earliest childhood memories is the FBI storming our house and taking my dad away in handcuffs. And so I had this big problem with authority. So when it came time for me in school, and normal kids would have kind of diverted from that, I was sort of drawn to that. Then as I got into high school, it became less taboo. It became more acceptable because there was a lot of drinking, and especially marijuana. So I had access to all of these things. So very quickly I became the cool kid who had access to marijuana, especially. It didn't take me very long to figure out that I could make money doing this. And it didn't take me very long to figure out how to acquire harder drugs. I started using cocaine as a freshman in high school. I was 13 years old when I started using cocaine. I was very young. I was much younger than everyone else. So even though I was using drugs and doing these things, I always was gifted with school smarts, intelligence. So I was able to get through all of those classes and things very easily. I excelled. I was really young when I started. I was 13 when I started high school. With cocaine came a lot of chaos, a lot of drama. I started my criminal activity at that point in my life. I was breaking into houses, doing burglaries and things like that. We had like this little clique of friends. We were sort of vagabond kids. We were just like roamed around. We had our own cars and did crime. That's what we did. Fast forward a couple of years, here I am, I'm 15. I have a pretty heavy cocaine habit at this time. I was introduced to methamphetamine. That did it for me. Because, no kid wants to feel like a piece of shit because he is doing crime on a continual basis. Methamphetamine allowed me to not feel guilty for the things that I was doing. It allowed me to not feel guilty for selling drugs to kids my own age or younger. It allowed me to not feel guilty about breaking into somebody's house. It allowed me to just be numb and be awake, which is what I wanted. I caught my first adult charge at 15 years old, and I skipped out on bond And at age 17, I was caught again. This whole time I'm doing methamphetamine the entire time. So I started using methamphetamine at about age 15. At age 17, I was convicted as an adult and did my first prison sentence term. I was sentenced to 5 years, but I only did a little over a year of that because of good time credits, things like that. I was convicted under what's called the Youthful Offender Act, meaning I was a juvenile when the crime happened, but they sentenced me as an adult. So at age 19, I moved to Tennessee, where I began to go to college, joined a fraternity, and I began to drink on a daily basis. No more cocaine. There was still marijuana. Marijuana never really went away. I did equate cocaine with trouble, and just being out of prison. I was on parole. I was in college. Even drinking was illegal, but everyone drank. It wasn't a big deal. I was in this social fraternity where the chief of police was an alumni of our fraternity. The mayor of the city I lived in was an alumni of the fraternity I was in. Multiple police officers were alumni of the fraternity I was in. And it was just really kind of a key to the city to do whatever, I mean, within reason. So drinking was a huge part of my college experience, and it became a problem. If I got rid of the cocaine and the meth, but I drifted to alcohol, and alcohol became a daily thing for me. I needed to drink, and at a certain point in time, I needed to drink just to not be hungover the next day. It wasn't like I was getting the shakes and the DTs, but I would be so hungover the next day that if I just took a drink, then that would settle that. But then it became not going to classes, then it became not going to work. It began to take over my life. I'm an introvert by nature. I've always just kind of been to myself, and I've always felt like it was always just me. My mom raised me by herself. And when it's a single mom raising a kid, she's always gone at work. So I kind of raised myself in the fact that I was always alone with myself. I had to figure things out for myself. I had to figure out how to cook myself. I had to clean the house. I was well beyond my years growing up. Most kids are, taken care of. Most kids are, there's a two-parent household, and most kids' parents go out and they go to their baseball games and all of those things. I had to get myself to my baseball games. I had to get myself to school, to and from, and it wasn't because, it was just because my mom needed to do what she needed to do in order to get by. Coupled with that was we always moved around a lot. We never stayed put, and I never built those solid relationships with my peers because we were always sort of on the move. I was always the new kid. So I had that growing up my whole life, and I kept it into my college years. I kept kind of to my, even though I was in a social fraternity, I did things socially. I also spent a lot of time by myself. I had a girlfriend, but again, I spent a lot of time by myself. My relationships definitely suffered from my alcoholism. I was taught that you make friends with people, you socialize with people from those who you can benefit from in some way. And I expected that of others of me. I didn't expect you to form a relationship with me unless I had something that I could offer you. And it wasn't just loving and kindness, it was usually monetary. I joined a social fraternity so that I could sell marijuana to a social fraternity and make more money. I joined a social fraternity to network so that I could profit from that. I never had the ability to apply any sort of techniques in building social relationships just strictly on a friendship. or a love. It was always, what can you do for me? I think it's generational too. Like my dad was raised where you're seen and not heard. You're a man and you don't talk about feelings, and that sort of trickled down to me where you're seen and you're not heard. You don't talk about feelings. If something's bothering you, you bottle that shit in and then you do whatever you will with it. It wasn't commonplace for people to talk about feelings or emotions. I stayed away from the harder drugs. I did smoke marijuana. And then when I left Tennessee to move back to Arizona, I got right. It's like I never left that lifestyle to begin with. You know, I got right back into the methamphetamine, right back into trying to sell drugs, looking for the quick buck. I always thought that this was my destiny. You know, I'm a product of my environment, and those are victim mentalities. Those are victim speeches and thoughts. When you're a victim of your circumstances, when you're a product of your environment, those are victim words. And as long as I had the thought of I can't help the way I am because I was raised to be that way, I'm always going to end up and get drawn back into those situations over and over and over again. You know, until you can become aware that my actions lead to my consequences, then I'm not owning that, and I'm a victim, and I'm going to remain a product of my environment. I'm going to remain a victim of my circumstances, and I'm going to always be drawn back into those chaotic situations. Really, the thing is I love drama. You know, I love that chaos. I love the thought of I can get in trouble for this. The thought never occurred to me, if I stop doing crime, I won't get in trouble. That never occurred to me. The only thought that I had was, if I do it differently, maybe I won't get caught. And it was really, I had no shot, you know, because we call it stinking thinking. Stinking thinking got me back into those situations over and over again. So when I came back to Arizona, I find myself in the same group of people who are doing the same things that they were doing when I left in the first place. Of course they're doing the same stuff. They have that same thinking. I get right back involved into the drugs, into criminal activity. And I always just kind of thought that if I changed my MO, that I wouldn't get caught doing it. So whereas when I was a kid, I was breaking into houses. I didn't do that anymore when I, you know, grew up. I thought that was like kid stuff to do. So instead, what do? I figure out how to do forgeries when I'm in college. I start to forge prescription medication, and I start to sell those, and I start to make money. And then when I move here, I continue with the forgery, and it's like a whole different thing. And here I am thinking, you know, I'm gonna get away with this because I'm always about the quick, easy thing. And I'm only building relationships with people who I can benefit from, even on a financial level. So yeah, I get right back into the meth, and it didn't take me very long until I'm back in prison again. By the time I'm 32 years old, I have about 8 years in the system, and I have zero ability to not use drugs. I have zero ability to talk about emotion. I have zero ability to cope with any of those things. I have zero ability to build healthy relationships with people. And it all does stem back to that childhood, that upbringing of not talking, only being seen, and what do you have to offer me? And when I'm only thinking about me the entire time, I have zero ability to think about other people, none, unless I'm thinking about what they can do for me. And that is addiction, you know, it's selfish and self-centered. By the time I'm 32, I've done 8 years in prison. By the time I'm 32, I have 3 kids who I don't support. By the time I'm 32, I have zero prospect at any sort of long-term employment, at any sort of healthy, long-lasting relationships. And then I catch my very last prison sentence for forgery. What was different is I just got a little bit honest. I asked for help. I've never, throughout all that time, even getting caught with drugs, I never admitted to being a drug addict, ever. At that moment of my last prison sentence, I admitted I was a drug addict. And I then asked for help, and help was given to me. You know, I was given treatment, was given, you know, the ability to go to sober living afterward, and to start a program of recovery. I was introduced to, you know, AA through my treatment program that I went through. You know, and I didn't go into it willingly where I thought, okay, I'm gonna stop using. I went into it thinking if I could get off of these drugs, then I could do crime way better. And that was my first thought when I went into it. I was good at what I did when I was loaded. How much better will I be at it? Clean. And that was my thought process. And through that process of going through treatment and getting involved into the steps of AA and that, working on my spiritual self, really, through that came a thought that if I don't do crime, I won't go to prison. I never thought that, ever. And you would think someone who is intelligent, I'm not a dummy, you would think that would have been a thought long ago. It was never even popped in my mind one iota. It was miraculous, that thought. And I was like, wow, I could not believe it. Yeah, so I mean, I came into this with ill intentions, totally ill intentions. I wanted to be better at crime, so I wanted to get clean. And through working the steps and going to therapy and talking with someone, I had the epiphany of not getting better at crime by not doing drugs, but by not doing crime, I won't have to do drugs. By not doing crime, I won't have to go back to prison. You know, and my life today is just, I live a good life. You know, I don't think about how to get over on the next person. I don't think about how to get away with things. And the reality is this, is that I'm never going to go to prison if I don't do crime. And that wasn't, you know, those thoughts are not something that was in my head 6 years ago. You know, today I have a really good relationship with my parents. You know, I get to go over there and I get to talk about the things that bothered me, and I get to apologize for telling my mother it was her fault the way I turned out. It was one of the worst things I ever said to my mom. She asked me, how did I end up this way? And I told her I ended up this way because of you. And that was in a fit of desperation on my end to try to get out of, you know, taking responsibility for my own actions. Today, I'm not a victim of my circumstances. Today, I'm not a product of my environment. Today, I get what I sow. You know, today, my actions are what causes the reaction. And I own that today, which is completely different. There's consequences no matter what we do, positive or negative. You know, and I'm prepared to pay those today, and I'm prepared to own those today. It's an amazing experience to not have to, you know, worry about where the next fix is going to come from, worry about if the law enforcement's going to break down my door. I don't have to worry about those things, and it's great. The whole way I go about approaching people is completely different. I'm no longer looking at you and what you can do for me. Part of the reason I do what I do now is because it makes me feel good about myself. I have been given the opportunity to help people get the same help that I needed. I do it because I want to help people. It's not always about getting them into my recovery program. If I can help them get into any program that's out there, then I feel good about myself. My job is done. Looking for help, it's not by accident. Everyone comes to a place in their life where they know that the way they're doing things isn't the way they want to do things. And if the way that you're doing things is in conflict with the way you want to do things, then you have to do something to change that. Picking up the phone, making a call, talking to someone you know. If you don't know anyone, look up a meeting, go talk to somebody. They will absolutely point you in the right direction.